Welcome to another episode of Kaizen Cast. Small steps, big changes. Everybody knows our motto, but I always like to share it. It's continuous growth and improvement, along with overcoming addiction and dealing with life problems and being able to communicate and talk about them. And that's really what, I brought to the table. And this is no different this morning with Maria Peters, um, a family friend, a wonderful young lady. She's a therapist. She has an amazing story that we're going to talk about today, and what the stuff she's overcome, and what she's doing to help others. Which is, we need more people like her in our life. So I'm really looking forward to this episode. Stay tuned because it's going to be a good one. Maria, thank you so much for coming on. We're very blessed to have you. Very blessed to have you in our lives, especially from my wife and my brother-in-law's being so close as you were. So you can kind of fill in the blanks and kind of tell everybody how that all started. But, before we get down that road, why don't you just tell us a little bit about, where you were from, how your childhood was, all that kind of stuff to
Mhm.
kind of get into where we're going with this story because it's a truly amazing one. You guys, we talked about it off air, so please welcome and thank you.
Thank you again. Yeah, I feel very blessed. Yeah, so as you know, me and Laurie and her brother and I go way back. But we basically went to college together, and then as life went on and trials and tribulations, we stayed connected, and so I've just been very blessed by them all. Um, but yeah, I mean, where do you start? What a great entry level for me, an entrance. But basically, I was, born in Athens, Greece, believe it or not. And as we were talking before on the phone, I I found out after years later of my parents who I thought were my biological parents were not. And
Incredible.
spoiler alert, 13 years later after they passed, um, I found out, sorry, they've passed 13 years ago, and I found out maybe like 3 or 4 months after my mom passed from lung cancer that traveled to the brain, unfortunately.
Sorry to hear.
Um,
I lost
yeah,
my dad to lung cancer, so I know the feeling.
yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. I would never change anything because of the beautiful moments that I had with both of them toward the end, but still the memories kind of haunt you sometimes, as you
I
know.
I understand. Yes.
But, yeah, it was a wild story because it was Mother's Day and something compelled me to look in a cabinet above the kitchen where I was living in my parents' house that they gifted to me after they passed. And there it was, my adoption papers, and just, I was shocked. My whole life just turned upside down. But
It's unbelievable.
now,
Just sitting up in the cabinet.
yeah, just hanging out.
Yeah, and what made you actually think about even going in there? You just like, let me just open. Isn't it funny how like I always say, I'm very we're Christian and, I brought God back into my life, but like how God kind of leads us to these spots. And all of a sudden, like, what was the chances of you opening the cabinet? I'm sure you were cleaning out the house, so there was probably a good
Yeah.
chance, but that was out right in the open, not hidden
And
anywhere, not in a safe, just right there.
yeah, and that cabinet, now that I think about it, because that was my childhood home that I would, so basically what happened as the story go to answer your question, intuition, like I just had a very strong spidey sense, as I call it. And I felt compelled, must open the cabinet. And I cried hysterically in the most beautiful way because not only did I find the adoption papers and the letters of reference and things like that, but I also found, cards that my mom saved of just, birthday cards and little notes that I'd used to write when I was younger
Yeah.
to my parents, and just all those memories were just stored up there all this time. And I had no idea in my
Wow.
30s at the time.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I look back and I feel very blessed because they adopted me in Greece. They traveled to Greece. I guess as the story went, the laws back then were that the biological mother could change their mind 9 months later. So I was, a blip in their eye, so to speak, of my adoptive parents, Judy and Chris. But I didn't know that I had to stay there for 9 months, and I remember vague, like, memories of it and asking family friends, and they finally told me the whole unveiling of the story.
Wow.
My godmother helped me kinda put the pieces together, but I guess I came
How
over to
how old how old
Saugus,
were you when you got it when you were adopted by your parents?
like, infancy. I mean,
Oh,
like, maybe 5 or 6 months. Yeah, I was
oh,
very, very young.
okay.
And I went back to Greece to visit, my dad's, well, my, adoptive dad's relatives. And I never, I was maybe 2 or 3 then, and I have pictures of it and everything. So that's all I remember from Greece. The rest, I had no idea that any of that had happened. But I felt so blessed. And it's funny, being a therapist of 26 years now. Um, I've talked to people about them being adopted and finding out, and it was almost like foreshadowing my life. I had a client years and years ago, a teenager, that was distraught and was like, "I found out that my mom is not my mom." And I just, with compassion and love and support. And, now I look back and I'm like, wow, that was my life foreshadowed. Who knew the universe was like, hey, this is going to be your life years and years later down the line.
Right, right, exactly, exactly.
But we
That's
came
incredible.
back, we came after the 9 months or whatever, we came back. We lived in, I guess they were in Lynn, they were in different parts of Massachusetts, but my home that I was raised in was Saugus, Massachusetts.
Okay. And, is that where you were, like, raised and
Mhm. Yep.
lived your whole life? And then now are you now I don't wanna skip around to, like, where you are today, but you went from
Mhm.
Massachusetts, obviously went to Northeastern
Yep.
with my brother-in-law, stayed are you still in Boston right now, in the Boston area?
So I'm in Salem now, Salem,
Oh, okay.
Mass. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Beautiful.
yeah, so I went, so yeah, I got my degree in it was funny, my undergrad, which is when I met, your brother-in-law. I was on the fast track to being a research assistant and doing experimental psychology. And, my mom at the time, Judy, my adoptive mom, she was like, "Well, why don't you volunteer for a lab and see if it's, do you really want to have this be your life path?" And it took 2 months of doing some coding, and I was like, "Nope, absolutely not. I'm not a numbers person. I
Right.
miss the connection." So I finished up my undergrad at Northeastern with experimental psychology, and then I immediately flipped the script and became, did counseling, and that's where I reside now, working and doing counseling psychology. But that I missed that connection, and, typing ones and zeros and coding. I was like, where's the vibe with people? Where's the energy? Where's the connection? So,
Exactly. And there is none. There's so many people my brother, um, oldest brother, very, very smart. Man, and he was doing code before coding was cool, right? And,
mhm,
and brilliant, but also a people person, so same type of thing, like, he was had the ability to do it, but wanted to be around people, and ran regional water company in New Haven, Connecticut, and
uh,
was one of their top dogs for a long time, but yeah, there it's a special person to do stuff like that. I mean, super brilliant, and super, I would say, introverted because they don't really need to be around people,
mhm,
unlike myself and yourself, where again, it leads back into our life story of, all our or all our faults that I like to call them faults because we were put on this earth to make mistakes, right? Nobody's
mhm,
perfect. And we go through our life and make choices, and sometimes they're the wrong ones. Sometimes we don't have a choice, right? Like, I mean, you didn't know you were going to be adopted. Like, how would you even know? But it also, that choice ended up being something that was really, really fantastic because it took you out of so they took you out of Greece. Did they have to like, let me go back to that because they took you
mhm.
out of Greece after 9 months. You had to stay there for 9 months, or so did
Yeah,
your
because
adopted mother and father stay with you for 9 months?
so dad basically stayed back here to make money and,
Right.
uh, keep the fires burning, so to speak, at home in
Yep.
Saugus. And my mom actually went, and stayed with his relatives and basically waited the grueling process of making sure that, she I guess, as it was really sweet. As the story goes, I guess as soon as she saw me, she's like, "This is my kid, nobody's taking her from me."
Oh my goodness, that's
And
great. And she had seemed like
and
she had that personality, huh? Yeah.
yeah, as Laurie can, attest to, she was very strong-willed and nobody could, she was a strong Italian woman, so
Which I understand. I have one myself. She's amazing.
yeah.
Very blessed. Yeah.
Yeah.
But very strong-willed Sicilian. So I should trust me when I understand what you're talking about because they
Yeah.
when they're set and there's something in their mind, they're getting it done no matter what. And that's I think I've learned that from my mother and also my dad. But like my mother is when she decides she's gonna do something, it's there's no stopping her. It doesn't matter if she's gonna run through fire. So I totally agree with you. And it's tell me tell me now leading into let's get into kind of what we were talking about off air. When you had some of your own situations that had happened that also, I guess, maybe one of the reasons why you went into therapy too. Like you dealt with your own personal stuff that you're able to share with people, and I'm sure you do it on a daily basis. And I think the Kaizen Cast family and audience would love to hear about it if you would love to share it. So yeah.
Sure, yeah, I always say, personal reasons bring you to the field of helping for sure. And
Abs-
a lot of my coworkers and colleagues and past friends and such that are in the field, we all kind of share that common ground together. But yeah, I mean, you name it, I went through it. Bullying during, elementary school, where the same bullies, because at the time Saugus had zoning, so, meaning if you lived near someone in location, they would inevitably be in the school that you went. So, of course, my bully lived down the street from me. So,
uh,
lucky me, they followed me throughout all the way into high school. So, that was torture. Um, and that was
how-
just,
can I ask you a question? Because my wife and I talk about this all the time, and it's
Mhm.
interesting to me. Because my brain is always, like, thinking about stuff, and it's the world we live in today with our phones and computers, like, the kids who get bullied versus
Yeah.
how you went through, and I'm sorry you
It's a
went through that
different
because
level. It's a different level now
it's a
for the
different level
kids.
now, right? Like,
Yeah.
listen, I never had that happen to me, and I will tell you the truth. I don't lie to anybody anymore. I lied for a long time to myself, to many people, just because I was unhappy with my life, and I'm blessed, and I'm super happy where I am today. But I didn't love everybody thought, even my wife, because we grew up, went to junior high school together, went to elementary. She thought that I loved high school because I was this
Mhm.
big athlete and like I hated high school.
Yeah.
Hated it. I didn't I mean, I may believe I shouldn't say hated it, but it wasn't like, "Oh, I was so happy to go to high school every day." I was
Yeah.
happy to play sports because that was my happy place, but outside of that, I could care like, the whole and I wasn't bullied, and the
Mhm.
whole I used to help people that were bullied because I always taught all my kids. We have 5 we're a blended family of 5 now, and I have kids in my 20s, and I'm, raising Mason, who's 11, and we talk about this all the time about the bullying or leaving people out, like even your own friends. Like, sometimes it gets hard when there's 3 people and you kinda attach yourself to
Mhm.
one other person and the other guy feels left out or the other girl feels left out. That to me, that's just another form of, hey, that kid, that person or that child feels bad, and you got to include them. I've always been one to, I'm a team player and I love winning with other people. Um,
Mhm.
so I've always been the one that like, let me help the person that's being bullied. And, you know, interesting to me, you tell me now, like I said, it's a different world today because it's 24/7 with these phones, they don't stop. Did you when you came home from school, obviously, it was pretty close to 24/7 for you because the kid or the young la
Yeah.
girl or
And my
boy?
mom my mom was friends with the mom. I was like, "Oh my
Oh,
god." So,
oh god.
yeah.
Oh
So,
god. Did your
I
mom know
want
you were being bullied?
Not at the time, but I eventually did confide, and, that's actually a wild story too. Like you said, my mom was very strong-willed, and she actually, ended a long-time friendship with that mother because, the classic, "Not my kid," not my backyard, not my environment, not my kid.
Right.
And I mean, I sadly, this, like I said, it followed me throughout the years. There were a couple of bullies, but this one in particular, the elementary school one, followed me throughout the years. And, my mom caught them physically bullying me, we'll just say that much. And so that's when my mom was like, "Get out, absolutely not." And that's when she confronted the mother. And the mother just full on was like, "Well, your kid's kind of this, that, and the other." And my mom was like, "We're done."
Yeah,
That's it.
that is
So,
awesome. And no,
so
you
at
know what,
least
I
I
don't.
had that back, I had backup in that sense. But when I was at school, it was me and, everyone else again, me against the world, so to speak. But the difference of like the kids that I counsel now, they don't have what I was blessed to have. As tough as it was, I could go home and I could feel loved and supported and kind of like cheerleaded through another tough day where some of these kids, they don't have that. They go home and it's just as torturous as going to school. And my heart breaks for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I didn't even think about that part of it. Because I'm a loving father, I didn't even think that they could go home to even something worse.
Yeah.
And that's, wow. Yeah, that's something that's actually a little scary. That you're actually counseling kids that they have nowhere to go.
Yeah, exactly. So
And
that's why, like, even getting a job, I'm like, get out of the house. It's toxic. Go make friends with coworkers, go to friends' houses, whatever you need to do. Just get out of that environment so that it doesn't affect you as strongly as you get older.
yeah, that's a good point, and I never even really thought, like, I always just think of bullying, even with the phones because it doesn't stop and these kids are attached to their phones, so it's the texting, the Instagram, they put all this stuff on there and it's 24/7, 365. Unlike when we were growing up, I'm older than you, but like when we were growing up, it was like, okay, if somebody was getting bullied in school, at least their safe place was home, but,
Mhm.
I guess there are places that home's not even safe, which is pretty sad. Wow, that's, yeah, so when you got I have such a tough time with the bullying thing, and it's, I have to dig in a little deeper, and it's just like, I
Sure.
want you to did you have friends, like, in school that you
I
could
did. I had a
confide in?
couple of really good ones that would, kind of face them and say, leave her alone and,
Good.
things like that. So that was, yeah, and I still have a couple, I'm still connected with a couple of those people too. Um, but yeah, I mean, that was my saving grace. I feel like, why didn't I end up I still have the diagnosis of complex PTSD, which we'll get into later on. But, of course, sticks and stones, that whole phrasing. And it's funny because a lot of research now shows that um, don't get me wrong, the physical and sexual abuse affects people in a certain kind of way as well. But they're finding research that the verbal abuse, the emotional abuse that I've endured, things like that, that other people have endured, that's almost more damaging. One client said it best, and I was like, wow, that's deep. She said, I get smacked in the face or I get punched in, whatever that heals over time, but she's like the emotional stuff that can linger. There's an after effect. I tell people it's almost like an earthquake, like the sound waves that continue and continue. That's PTSD in a nutshell. That's trauma.
Yeah.
You got to deal with all that after the fact, after the events are done and even after people have passed on or no longer in your life. Those memories can kind of haunt you.
Yeah, interesting that you say that. Yeah, I know toxic environments and they can words can be just as bad as being physical. Absolutely. It's, and and then you add, again, been sober 5 years, then 25 years on Wall Street, and you add alcohol, into the mix, and you don't have a clear mind, and you don't know what you're, sometimes you have a short temper, and you say things that are not, nice, or but also, when you're in a relationship, see, this is the way I look at things too. When you're an adult, okay, different than when you're a child. I say this to my wife all the time. Children don't have, and tell me if I'm wrong, because this is right in your wheelhouse.
Mhm.
Children don't get a chance to make a choice when they're being told by adults, okay? Like, so that's a PTSD that could happen when they're a child. But then as you get older, you make choices yourself
Correct.
to either stay
Yes.
in the relationship, or to be in a toxic environment, and you continually stay in that cycle. And listen, I did it for a long time, for myself. Like, personally, after I didn't get drafted in baseball 20 something years, even making money on Wall Street and having all the nice things and the houses and the cars and the bullshit and the materialistic things, I still hated myself.
Mm. Mhm.
And I lived in this toxic environment in my own shit, never mind whatever else I was doing outside of that, right? Like, until you can realize that, why do most people not are want to make the change? Do you have an answer for that? Are they afraid? Are they
The devil they know, same thing for fast track years later when I was caught up in what eventually I knew were toxic, abusive relationships. Why do you keep going back? You know, there's very different answers. It for me, it boiled down to low self-esteem, like you said, when you just get, physically, emotionally, whatever, beat down, you just don't think you're worthy of anything. And you're just like, well, I felt like I was damaged goods. It's like, well, at least this person, they can tolerate me, which obviously not the right mindset to be in. But the devil, that was all I knew. The irony is, like, I can look back now and honestly answer, it was easier to know the pattern of what I'd go home to in the relationship than to start all over again and be rejected possibly by other people. I've talked to many clients and in that same scenario, and the sheer rejection or the fear of rejection, of not being loved and all that all over again, that was more painful to endure, that, predicting, than just staying in what you knew.
wow. And that's
And
you
that's
nailed it.
sad.
You nailed
That's
it.
sad.
Yeah, it is sad because um and if you don't mind, can you share your story? I mean, obviously you were in a terrible relationship, physically and mentally. So you went through it, and you're telling your story right now as we speak. And and to me, um, there's so many more people out there that would rather do what you were saying than say, you know what? Who It's okay to not know what the unknown is until you try again. You may fail, right? But that's life. Like, God, I fail all the time now, and I thought that we can't be perfect, right?
Yeah.
So, but to have that, I don't like, I don't even know how to express myself, because it hurts me enough to say that, like, wow, that you guys would stay in a, and anybody, not just you, other people that would stay in a relationship, whether it's physical, emotional, or both, abusive, um, and say this is better than what happens if I'm going to be rejected again. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's
A lot of times too, I find with the counseling field and people I've helped over the years, because I've helped all walks of life. I have no judgment. I've done couples work, and I've worked with transgender, and I've worked with, felons, and you name it, I've worked with it. And I just tell people, I'm not here to judge, I'm here to help, as best I can. Um, And so with that, it's, kids can be a real reason why people would also remain in really unhealthy relationships, because sometimes, unfortunately, there's, mind tricks and tactics that the abuser will use to kind of, codependency. Basically, they will keep you dependent on them financially, emotionally, things like that. So, like, case in point, you have a blended family of 5 kids, you're in an abusive relationship, you're hanging on to that relationship because that's your paycheck for those kids' mouths and food, you know?
Interesting.
Um, some of the best advice I was given by friends when I was kind of going through it and all that was sometimes you have to think of future self. And I thought that was genius, you know. So in those scenarios, you know, with children, for example, what's the I'm trying to think how to explain it. Like, what's the role model? What is the message? How do you want to demonstrate and exemplify love to these kids? And what you're doing in the relationship that you're enduring and the, you know, the abuse, that's not the best message to send them. That's not the best role modeling to do. You know yourself, whether you like it or not, when you become a parent or a parent like figure, you're a role model by default. You're like they're these kids are like little sponges and they pick up on everything you do, say, and don't do. And so that's a lot of pressure.